After about 2 years worth of data, we feel we had the yield monitor paid for. The first thing we did was something that's pretty obvious if you ride in a combine. We took the first 15 said with an Optrix system which measures the NDRE, the greenness of the corn, and relates that into a algorithm and applies nitrogen accordingly. And we're still on a learning curve on that, but that's some of the things that we've done as far as collecting data. Now, to use it, we've looked at our yield maps and correlated that with side dress maps to see where things are. We've even made profit things, and that's about as far as we've really been willing to let the data go out. Even to the extent that this year we've traded up some monitors, and our old software we can't read the new data with from the new monitors. So what we're going to do is we're in the process of figuring out, do we want that data to go off it's not really worth it at this point. They need some more development. And we've seen the leading edge of this precision farming, and we've seen the bleeding edge too. So overall, I think that it is something that pays. So the one thing I wanted to close with is one thing's for sure is everything's going to change as farms become larger and as they become more like a corporation in structure. We're going to need
policy concerns for this year. Carl?
Well, thank you. As it was stated, American Farm Bureau Board has really been looking and discussing this for well over a year now. We've met with John Deere, Monsanto, DuPont, a lot of the large corporations, just to share what our concerns are in moving forward with this. A lot of companies have policies in which they have set for the privacy, but the policies can be changed where a contract is more solid. It's something you can go back to. Like I said, the larger issue is really not ownership, but control. Just for example, your data is collected and stored by the company. It cannot be retrieved by the company. If farm data is shared with a local seed company, the chance for EPA to use that information against you is really scary, and same with your pesticide or GMO usage. It could be used against you. In concluding, we feel every farmer must decide for themselves the benefits of the precision technologies are worth the risk. Our information is valuable. We must consider
Law Center at Dickinson School of Law. He's often called on to give presentations throughout the United States on Ross?
Okay, thank you. Minimize the risks of that may arise. As Carl mentioned, the use of a contract is the best way to do that. A contract that states specifically what data is going to be provided, what data is going to be used, how exactly the data will be used, who is authorized to use that data. And as you're presented with contracts, it's, as in any other legal matter, it's extremely important that you read and understand the contract, and that you do not rely on any representations that are made that are not included in the written language of the contract. Now, in every situation, it may not be practical, or it may not be possible to have a contract that is that's providing these details. Often, companies will present you with a privacy policy, and as Carl mentioned, it's important to remember that these privacy policies can change. So the fact that a company today determines that this is how they intend to use the data, next year they may have a different policy. So it certainly is preferable for you to execute a contract than it is for you to rely on the terms of a privacy policy. And really the real difference between a contract and a privacy policy is in the remedies that will be available to you should a company misuse that data. If you have a contract, the contract will specify specific remedies if you're financially harmed from that disclosure, if you're relying on a privacy policy, you likely will not have the same remedy in the event of a misuse. Now, there also are a couple statutory provisions that may provide a remedy, and I say may because these are statutes that were not created for farmer-generated data, and you're going to have to look at the specific situations of each individual case to determine whether these statutes are going to apply. In 2004, Pennsylvania passed a trade secrets law. Now, when you think of trade secrets, you think of the formula for Coca-Cola. This is a formula that has a tremendous amount of individual value. The formula Coca-Cola and make sure that the formula is accessible to a very limited number of people. They want to keep that secret. That's a trade secret. But the definition of trade secret essentially provides that information, a variety of types of information, if it has independent economic value and if there are attempts made to keep that information secret, it meets the definition of a trade secret. So you can look at, you've heard different types of data that can be used, and I think some of that data would meet that definition, where it has independent economic value, it's intended to be kept secret. Now, who has the protection? Who gets the protection? If it is a trade secret, who gets the protection? And I think you would have to look at potentially the farmer, and Carl mentioned the potentially the landowner if you have a renting situation. Also, the company that is compiling and aggregating that data may have some potential protection from the trade secret law as well. If there is a violation, a disclosure of a trade secret, there would be the availability of monetary damages, punitive damages, and you also could get an injunction to stop a company or an individual from releasing that data. The second statute that might provide protection is a federal statute, the Economic Espionage Act. This was enacted by Congress in 1996, and again, it provides protection for trade secrets. So if the data is determined to be a trade secret, this statute would offer criminal prosecution. So if there is a theft of a trade secret, that provides a possible remedy. Some concerns have been expressed about the government getting this information, or it being easier for the government to obtain this information. I think a contract as well as a privacy policy are really going to have limited value in preventing that. I think that's likely a subject that better protection would be provided through a statute, because if I think a company, simply because they have a contract that prevents the release, that may not be sufficient to prevent the release. Also, concerns have been raised about information being disclosed through the Freedom of Information Act request. The FOIA only applies to government records. So it would only apply if the government obtains the information and maintains that within their agency records. There is an exemption that provides that commercial information is not to be disclosed through FOIA, so there is at least some protection from that. And finally, some concerns have been raised about information being disclosed through civil litigation, through the use of a subpoena. And again, I think contracts and privacy policies are going to have limited value in preventing the disclosure. But if information is subpoenaed, I think efforts should be taken to limit the disclosure so that it's only reviewed by the court or by the parties.
Thank you, Ross. We set aside a lot of time for these presentations for questions of our panelists to keep this discussion going, to answer any of the questions that you folks have. Who has the first question? Questions? You want to start us off, Russell? All right.
And I'll do this in sort of two parts, two-part question. I guess, the first is I listened to the discussion. Maybe a basic question is, if the farmer generates the data, does the farmer own the data? Right? I mean,
Right.
it seems like a simple question, but if you're talking about sort of controlling something that you own is one thing. If you're controlling something that somebody else may own, that's a different conversation. So if the farmer generates the data, does the farmer own the data? Let me start with that question.
Anyone